How does it sound to you?
Sounds good.
Loud and clear?
Yeah. Yep.
All right, so I'm here with Josh Moenning. He is the owner of Myolean Piedmontese Beef, and he's also happens to be the mayor of Norfolk, the great city we reside in, or this building is in. Cheers, buddy.
Cheers. Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. So we were both a little all over the place this week, so we're not doing our normal steak on steak on steak. We've got one of my New York strips, and we've got a couple of his Piedmont beef tenderloin fillets here. Yeah. So we'll go ahead and give those a try. I'll let you go first.
All right. Okay. Wow. No pressure, right? So I understand this is the fourth such going
we're
of
four,
this, right?
but we're 50% failure rate
Yeah,
at
okay.
this point.
All right. Well, we'll try to do better tonight.
Now it's a little earlier in the day this time, so alcohol won't be the reason that we fail.
All right. Well, you cooked these. It looks like to almost perfection.
Perfect.
So.
The thermometer does not lie, my friends.
That's right.
I was just
Trust
telling him. Yeah, I have cooked a lot of steaks, and I still use a thermometer. I'm not the touch guy or the timed guy. I like to make sure it's going to be good.
Gotcha.
So you were asking where this booth is from?
Yeah. I mean, you're just looking at it. It looks like you walk back into a 1950s like classic steakhouse in a big city somewhere. So now I'm very curious as to where you actually.
It did not come out of any place that is distinguished.
Yeah.
So it's actually really fun when Callie it doesn't have to work up front. She serves drinks.
Yeah.
So again,
Okay.
and that's why we had trouble with episode 3. But no, this came out of Billy Frog's in Omaha.
Really?
Well,
really? I wouldn't have guessed.
You probably sat in it
wouldn't
before.
have guessed that. Maybe so. Now that makes sense. Now that I think about it. Yeah. I can see it though.
Yeah. So I like. So this is perfect. Your steak was a little thicker than my strip, and I like a tenderloin to be pretty rare. Mm-hmm. So I'm happy with that.
Yeah, just about right on both, I think. And you could really tell, I mean, just taking them out of the package, obviously the marbling difference. Right?
Yes.
It's the first thing you notice.
For sure.
Comparing
so you
your
talk
Angus
about
versus
that.
the Piedmontese, right? So, yeah, Piedmontese, for those who aren't familiar, is is known as one of the double-muscled breeds. So the cattle are naturally very lean, produce very little fat, and the meat reflects that. So there's not much marbling, which kind of defies conventional thinking that you can have a
tender steak,
flavorful, tender steak with no marbling. But Piedmontese genetics are very unique in the fact that even though that's the case, there's a little intramuscular fat, they produce a very lean beef. Very lean beef that's also tender. So that's how we market our beef: lean, low fat, but also tender.
Yeah.
And there's the research to back it up, like the U.S. Meat Animal Research Center
for certain
does their shear force
testing. Yep.
And Piedmontese always ranks right there with Angus in terms of tenderness. So. We like to think it's somewhat the best of both worlds.
It's fantastic. Now, when did you start going direct to consumer, and when did you? How long has your family been raising cattle?
Right. So, my dad gets almost all the credit for this. Dr. Larry Moenning, large animal veterinarian in Madison County, practiced nearly his entire career in Madison County. And after 30-some years, I think 32, 33 years, got out of his vet practice and in his quote-unquote retirement, started building a small Piedmontese cow herd. So that was probably early 2000s, I guess. Yeah, and just bit by bit, kept buying cows, and I was in Lincoln at the time, and so I got to do the farmers market every Saturday. And we built up a...
You were in Lincoln for school or for...
I had just graduated from college. Yeah, I just graduated from the university. And then lived there until 2008, 2009, before moving back to this area. So during that time, we did Lincoln Farmers Market, which is pretty big farmers market.
Right.
And that helped us build up a clientele. So what we do today is primarily direct-to-consumer, bulk orders, quarters, halves, whole beef.
Right. And one interesting thing I would say about folks that are going to work those farmers markets or do that is it is a way to avoid getting yourself into trouble when you're talking about direct-to-consumer beef, because you are going to be able to liquidate the clientele there that is one that wants to liquidate or sorry, they're going to help you liquidate that animal on a balanced basis.
Right.
Or sell that animal on a balanced basis. Whereas as you scale out of that, it becomes important to find other ways to do that. Absolutely. Now, I would have spent a lot more time at farmers markets if my wife would have let me, just to make sure.
It's work. It's time consuming. Yeah. Of course, all of this is work, but you can only do as much as your resources will allow, of course, but there's certainly a good way to create exposure for your product, right? And that time during Lincoln doing that, a good 7, 8, almost 10 years, because we continued to do it even when I moved back to Norfolk, and we stayed with the Lincoln market, helped build up a nice clientele list that eventually turned into quarters and halves and beef. And you're right. We tried during that time to do the retail thing and restaurants. It's really hard. It's really hard to keep up for a smaller producer on that volume and the consistency, of course, especially on non-ground beef products.
That's the biggest thing I want to work with producers and my own brand, because we have a really nicely laid out plan, right? But this is something I'm trying to build for our own brand, as well as other people, is to get on a schedule and to get folks to move through those cuts. I want to, if you come in and are working with me, I want to assign you a quota on your own product. So like let's commit to this being a serious production or a serious percentage of your production, and sell some beef.
Yeah, and that's really what I like about the model you're creating here, providing that opportunity for local producers to have that outlet, because it doesn't really exist right now.
No.
And I think that's I'm guessing that's partly the reason you were successful with your USDA grant, is that the uniqueness of the model that you're proposing here and the value that provides in keeping local dollars in the local economy. Yeah. And that's so important, especially in a region like ours where we raise some of the best beef in the world.
Absolutely.
But then we send it off to packers to capture most of the profit from it.
Yeah. Right? So. Well, and what we were talking about with this grant, what I like about what we did, the facility we're in, the business plan we wrote, the vision of what I'm doing, and of course it's not just me. I've got both of our families on Brittany and I's families are really supportive of this project. It's an Albers family project, and it's a McNally family project. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is this can be scaled up, the footprint we're in and the plan we've created, into a truly regional facility. This doesn't have to just be, and that's one of the things I tried to highlight in our proposal, was that we're going to start making a small impact for a handful of family brands, but it's going to be a big impact on their family farm, but a small impact on the greater market. But I think that we could run a lot of product through here. I just gave you a tour, and we have the ability to scale this into something that could move through some meat.
Well, I think you did that right too, in terms of finding an existing facility that allows you room to grow and utilizing it though from the beginning, because I understand you've got arrangements with some leasing some space out for use that might be a difference maker in making a project like this go. So
interestingly enough, if anybody's writing a grant proposal, that was one of the questions that I asked. Until we get to the point where we are utilizing the space, can that space be leased out? And the answer was, if you can prove that improves the financial feasibility of it, we want to protect those dollars just as badly as you do. Mm-hmm. They don't want to see the project fail. Right. They don't want to see their investment fail. And so we were able to come in and take over a fairly large facility and get that leased out. And so we have 3 phases of building this project out. Mm-hmm. And so we were just able to, highlight all those things and just prove that we're going to be good stewards of those dollars. And, I don't know how many opportunities like this are going to exist. Certainly there's going to be at least one more. Yeah. They're talking about MPEP 2. Yeah. And they've made that commitment through the Inflation Reduction Act and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, I want to kind of reinforce the point. The fact that you guys were in the first batch of recipients is a big deal.
We're excited.
Nationally, when you look at it, it's not a huge
21
pot
projects,
of money, right?
Yeah.
It's $150-some million in the entire grant program. The first tranche was 73 that was announced. So, to be one of 2 in Nebraska, that's pretty cool. And it's great for Norfolk. I love it.
I loved, I got to be in the same headline as Henry Davis, and I moved very little meat compared to that gentleman.
That's a pretty big deal. Yeah.
He's got a
royalty in the Nebraska beef world. There.
Yeah. He's got a little bit more going on.
Yeah.
but no, it was exciting, and we you and I, before we talked about the 4-to-1 match, which is how this grant played out for us or for the whole project. And I think that while it'd be nice if they just wrote you a blank check for your whole project, I think it's awesome that the taxpayer dollar goes further. Mm-hmm. It makes certain that the applicants are doing it for the right reason,
and are bought in.
And are bought in. Right. Like I'm not doing this with any. I have to succeed, right? Mm-hmm. It's still my butt on the line. Yeah. And so that's. I think that is a really crucial part of it. Actually, it makes the projects a little more well vetted. Yeah. When you have that much on the line, it's enough to make a big difference. So they didn't have any minimum or any cap. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There were certainly some minimums in that you need to have a third-party feasibility study, and so you're going to invest some money. You're not going to apply. You're not going to spend 3 or 4 months writing a 350-page document for $15,000. Yeah. But there were no minimums, and the max was like crazy high, like $25 million. Mm-hmm. But it was a unique opportunity, and I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, and good to hear too, because I didn't really study it. I saw news of it, and tried to pay attention as it rolled out. But the fact that there weren't stipulations necessarily on size opened it up to a variety of participants, and I think that's good for the market. I mean, there's not a cookie cutter approach to solving some of the challenges we have in the
and one thing I've talked ad nauseum about is that you have to have 2 venues for the cattlemen to value up his animal. Folks that are interested in directly valuing up that animal, where there might be $1,000 or $1,200 a head to be had. Mm-hmm. You got to really work for that, but it is possible. Right. But there's also, all of us are family producers of livestock. We're decades upon decades away from utilizing our livestock facility just for Albert's beef, quote unquote. We need a good macro environment for live cattle as well. This isn't just about directly valuing it up, and it's also about having a solid market, which is why I was so excited. I was like, I told Britt, if we win, there will be one big project and one little project.
Yeah.
And here we are in Nebraska. There was one big project where we're adding 500 head of capacity every single day, in and out. And then our project where you can just directly value up your animal. We're going to spend some money to kind of hedge our bets and have our own family brand. And the beauty of beef, it's like, look at the difference of marbling you discussed. Look at the different breeds. The Piedmontese thing is like a different type of wine than my product, or perhaps go up onto the stratosphere of price, but a full blood Wagyu, you know. Right. And so one of the things we've done here, of course, we want to sell meat every day, not just on holidays or special occasions. So I have some really cheap stuff in here. It's not from my farm, but I also have a livestock producer, or a full-blooded Wagyu producer from Seward, and we're going to work with him to start carrying some of his products. So it's interesting because, you know, we sit here and I've got some stuff for $7.60 a pound on the ribeye side. That's my low end. Yeah. But I've got some $90 a pound full-blooded Wagyu. Right. And I think that is going forward kind of highlights the difference in beef. Sure. It's like, okay, and people don't have to think, you know, I'm going to save a bunch of money on my beef purchase. You have to think about it this way. It's like, if I'm feeding my family of 4, the dollars per pound don't matter. Give your family the good stuff, right? Yeah. I mean, they really don't add up. When you look at what the average consumer spends, or what they eat for red meat, and then you have that because it's what they eat at home. You're not talking about a big shift in dollars to go to a local producer. Right. It may look like it on the face value, but if you do the math,
I would argue it can be more economical.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, but you're exactly right. With the wine analogy, we are the Napa Valley of beef, right? And so the market should kind of reflect that. And, you know, as you're talking about bringing more value through markets, to me, it kind of harkens back to the tradition of this area of Norfolk. Not too far from here was one of the largest, if not the largest, livestock auction market in the country. And there was more competition, and it was better for the producer, right? Yep. And so this kind of model gets back to that, I think, in terms of giving local producers an outlet to capture more for the work that they put into cattle. But
make no bones about it. You've been doing this long enough, and I've been doing this long enough. It is extra work too. Yeah. You know, I mean, this isn't walking into the bank and signing papers for a pen of cattle and you win or lose. You know, it's. Yeah. I wrote in that kind of my thoughts on this grant and this facility. You take one problem and turn it into 500 or 600 problems, and I think that's like the motto. Like that's what we have to avoid. How do we turn one problem into one awesome valuing up of an animal? And something that truly brings on-farm income and money back to the rural, where everybody wins. Customer likes it better. Sure. They know the story. Yep. They know that they're voting with their dollars to support your family. Right. Blah blah blah.
And creating that access in the marketplace for the consumer, for some of the best beef raised in the world. Right. You know, it's ironic that we. Live in the bread basket of the country, and you raise so many agricultural goods here, but then a lot of times in the grocery store, or the food we eat is shipped in from hundreds, if not thousands of miles, right? So
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah.
My son was eating crackers yesterday, and they were from India. I was like, what? What in what world do we need to eat? Something that's been shipped that far.
Yeah. And we've talked a lot about that in terms of economic growth opportunities and economic development in the Norfolk region, in terms of local foods. How do we keep more of those local agricultural dollars in our local economy?
Yeah, not to beat a dead horse on this particular video, but that was another thing that I really wanted to focus on was you got to have this mom and pop beginning story, but you also have to have the ability to scale up. Mm-hmm. You have to have the ability for this to become, the Pat LaFrida of the Midwest. You have to have the ability for it to become a success story, and that family to benefit. Yeah. Right. And so that's what I want to provide is something that, we work with super small producers, and I hope we all become middle to large producers, and that's the goal of building something like this is kind of tailor-made for that.
Sure. And it's to your earlier point, if this were easy, everybody would be trying to do it, right? But it's not easy. And before we started tonight, I made the comment that I think you very quickly had to become a jack of all trades, because it's everything from doing the work to raise the beef, to produce the beef, but then the marketing, doing some of the things we're doing now. Writing a 350-page grant proposal, and handling customer needs. Yeah. In the meantime, so it's a lot. It's from A to Z. Yeah. A to Z. Yeah.
And there's been a lot of days I wondered if I should just sit back and do my job, and but you know what?
But nothing ever changes that way.
Yeah,
right? Nothing changes that way. So,
and I would say to any of you, if you're wondering about taking on a massive project, or sitting at home and like trading livestock futures or something. Just get good at the livestock futures. Like, you should just be better at that. You talked to my friend Jimmy Boyle about how to be good at that. That's a better way. We're doing podcasts in our free time. I think he's on his boat.
Easier on your physical and mental and spiritual.
I don't know about mental. It's easier on everything. But I laughed thinking about. I was talking to somebody else about this a few days ago about, less and less involvement in some of these other endeavors, and more just like a head down trying to figure this out. I was like, boy, there were some times to take a different fork in the road, but I am super excited about the tools we've created and where we're gonna go with this. So, but with that. We don't want people to get bored with grant and processing talk. Tell me a little bit about, you're the mayor of Norfolk. Tell me about Norfolk, and tell me about how you ended up in politics and how you ended up mayor of Norfolk.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, if people were getting bored with grant talk, then get ready for this. And by the way, I went from taste test territory to full out supper. Yeah. So, strip's very, very good, by the way. I don't, from an early age, for whatever reason, I always had the government and politics bug, which is uncommon in my family. Like I said, my dad's a veterinarian. I have two younger sisters who are both in healthcare. I didn't get the science gene, for better or worse. I got the social studies gene, and right out of school, studied journalism at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, studied advertising, but didn't go that route. Right out of school, took a job in the Nebraska legislature as an aide for then Senator Mike Foley for a couple of years. And then I worked on Jeff Fortenberry's first run for Congress, and that turned into a job in his congressional office. So I was his district director and communications director for several years living in Lincoln, and then also for a couple of years after I moved back to Norfolk about 2008, 2009. Having had a little bit of experience in both state and federal government, when I got involved in local government in Norfolk running for city council in 2012, I came to the realization that the most gratifying experience I would have in government is local government, because you can actually make an impact. I think you can see stuff get done more in real time, and you don't have to deal with all the partisan BS that so often dominates Washington and more our state house in Lincoln. It's just local government's the front lines. It's more about finding solutions to problems than it is playing politics, and I enjoy that part of it. So being on council for 4 years from 12 to 16 in Norfolk was a good training ground, to kind of get some experience, some familiarity with how city operations work. Ran for mayor in 2016. Was apparently the only guy stupid enough to want the job. Ran unopposed. So they're like, okay, here you go. But since that time, and then reelected in 2020, since that time, we've put a lot of focus on quality of life enhancement and trying to build an atmosphere, an environment in the community where people our youth and newcomers can see themselves calling this place home. In my various roles and capacities, I attended rural economic growth conferences over a 15-year span, and all of them focused on things like affordable housing and workforce training. Naturally, right? You need that stuff, those mechanics to support a community. But I think unless you have a community that people actually want to live in, that stuff's not going to matter.
Right.
So that's why we've put a lot of focus on building up a quality of life. Because if you're not right now competitive in the arena of quality of life, you're going to, especially in rural places, you're going to have a hard time maintaining your population. It's going to be very easy for your kids and your grandkids to leave and never come back, and to not be able to recruit enough population growth to maintain a city. And so and when I say quality of life, I mean it's everything from new housing options that better meet market demands, to a growing, a thriving and attractive and energetic downtown area.
There's been a ton of growth there since 2000, so I would say 17.
Yeah, I think that's about right. 17, 18 was when you saw a lot of the new things that you see today kind of get their start.
Yep.
And in fact, a few of the restaurants downtown, a little bit later than that, because it was fall of 2019, right before COVID, that a few of them anyway got their start, and there was a lot of concern. Are you going to be able to withstand that?
Yeah. And
they did, and that's another great thing about the community. People rallied around small businesses.
Yeah, and that person that I'm thinking of, and you're talking about, is thriving now. And they're on their second venture. In downtown Norfolk.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that kind of brings up a point. Like, obviously, I'm a conservative. You're a conservative, but you can't be so tough that you can't believe there's no reason to have government, no reason to have community projects, no reason to work with each other on some things. Yeah. I think that, you've done an incredible job in Norfolk, and I'm sure you've had to push through a few of those conversations.
Yeah. I make the point, I hear a lot that government needs to operate more like a business, right? Well, businesses naturally have to invest in themselves and invest in the future to grow. And it's no different for communities. And so, that's not to say you can't be creative about how you finance and try to fund investments. the riverfront project in Norfolk. For those unfamiliar, Norfolk was started in the 1860s on the banks of the North Fork of the Elkhorn River, and since that time the rivers had changing roles throughout in the community. It was the place that gave the city life in the first place, and then through flooding and over the next few decades, it got to be seen more of it as a liability than an asset, right? Well, a big flood control project that was a big investment that the city made itself in the 1960s helped secure that area as a flood-controlled area. And now we're trying to bring that North Fork, Johnson Park area back to a relevance in the community that it hasn't had for 140 years, right? So, and I think there's opportunity to do that, and we had to be creative in funding the North Fork River restoration by partnering with local NRD, seeking state grant resources, raising money privately, budgeting over the last 5 or 6 years through our normal budgeting processes for Parks and Rec and Keno funds. And now we're under construction for, basically removing the spillway, the old dam on that river, which presents a 13-foot abrupt drop in the river channel, and replacing that with 8 different drop structures, which will create a series of rapids just off our downtown, and we'll be in the middle of a 3-hour kayak tube float in Norfolk. And is that a cure-all to community growth and development and quality of life? No, but it's a unique a unique component of outdoor recreation.
Well, for sure.
That we have here that will be unlike anywhere else in the state.
So what? When's that going to be complete? Are you thinking?
The river improvements should be finished by Memorial Day of next year. So,
oh, nice.
So right now they've done 4 of the drop structures downstream of the First Street Bridge. Now working on replacing that bridge, and then we'll do the next 4.
Now,
structures.
I generally like to check Facebook, Madison County Exchange for the mayor's thoughts and plans for the future.
my manifesto for
But for those that are generally don't think that will be utilized, it's like every time I've seen any sort of tubing, floating body of water, just stuff pops up around it. People just enjoy that type of recreation. I mean, Long Pine, Nebraska, great example. Now that's a spring-fed creek, whatever, but I mean, it's not half as wide as this room. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's a very small water feature, and what you're talking about with the North Fork is actually going to be a pretty substantial project, and
right, yeah, and when we first started the discussions on this in 2016, 17, we worked with a firm out of Durango, Colorado, and they said you need 3 things to make these projects successful, and that's consistent water flow. So it's fed by the North Fork, starting up by, I think, north and west of Osmond, actually. You need an elevation drop to create the rapids, right? We had that in the dam and spillway structure, and then you need proximity to an urban core. And we have all 3, and so you look at it, and I get it. It's hard, growing up here, especially during those years when the river was more of a liability and considered kind of a drainage ditch, right? It's pretty big thinking to say, oh, okay, well this is a beautiful thing. Something different someday, but it is a natural. I like it again because it harkens back to the city's history. The river that gave this community life in the first place, and it was useful then. It can be useful today, and so we're just taking the steps to turn it into a different kind of use.
And what bothered me, and I think has completely started to reverse, is when I was a kid, I feel like there was actually a quite a bit of wealth in Norfolk, and everybody left on the weekends.
Yeah.
Right. You know, I mean, it was the dollars flowed out of this town like crazy.
Yep.
And now, I mean, we're going to get to the point, you know, there's another hotel project. We're going to get to the point downtown where, and we're probably already there, where you would consider kind of a staycation date night downtown Norfolk over Omaha. You know, I mean, it's accessible, it's close, it's awesome.
As funny as that might sound to some of us now, what you're seeing in downtown, it becomes more and more imaginable by the day, right? Because, you know, again, to compare when I moved back to Norfolk in 08, 09, and looking around and a lot of empty storefronts, there was just not much happening downtown. Nobody was really trying, really. Yeah. Compared to today, when it's almost every week someone comes up to me with an idea, a business idea or some kind of creative idea to contribute to the existing growth, that's gratifying to see. You know, people are trying again and believing that Norfolk can do big enough things to have the opportunities that you're just talking about. And and it's all about uniqueness. I mean, there won't be another environment quite like this in the state of Nebraska. And you're already seeing investments being made on that confidence in the future, like what you guys did downtown with Bar A. How many different new restaurants and bars have we seen pop up in downtown in the last 2 or 3 years?
So it's a handful. Yeah.
I tell people we have an outdoor mall. It's called downtown, and I'd much rather it be like that than some outdoor mall on the outskirts somewhere, because there's elements of retail. I think there's close to 15 boutiques. There's about the same number of restaurants and bars. You've got a small hotel now. You'll have a bigger hotel with the Kensington coming on. I'm
really excited about that.
And so it's a nice mix. It's a nice mix of things.
Well, and consider the fact that all those kind of defunct buildings that even if they had retail in the first floor, the second and third floor did not have apartments. Now they're getting apartments. Yes. You know, I know my mother and father-in-law are putting in some more apartments. They've always actually maintained quite a few downtown, but it's really interesting to see people excited to live down there. And there are good jobs in Norfolk, and there just wasn't a culture around it. It was just a place to work,
right?
You know, and that was, which interestingly enough, I'm curious. What do you suppose the pull into Norfolk is for outside communities? I mean, for instance, I can think of a handful of women in Wisner that work in Norfolk. My wife works in Norfolk. Obviously, we're building businesses in Norfolk.
Right, yeah. You know, our largest employers, Faith Regional. I believe the statistic is 60% of their employees do not live in Norfolk. So we're a big draw for commuters working in Norfolk, living in surrounding smaller towns, for people coming in to shop. I think some of that has started to change slowly with the addition of new housing options in Norfolk. I think that's, for instance, there was, since 2017, I think we tallied up close to 1,500 new housing units built in Norfolk. A lot multifamily. There just hadn't been a lot of new
condos and apartments
units built for a long time. They've been met with a lot of success in the market, so we're seeing more and more demand for smaller units and higher density settings. And then, you know, in the last 6 to 8 months, the council has seen proposals for nearly another 500 units. So it doesn't seem like it's tapering off significantly. That growth continues. And I think a lot of it is people who maybe were living in a smaller town, driving into Norfolk to work, now having quality housing options, saying, okay, maybe it.
Yeah, well, and
makes sense to live.
You know how herds work. I mean, we're all like that. When you start seeing something that looks a little successful, they're going to chase it.
And the other positive thing I've seen is the number of younger people choosing to live in Norfolk. I think COVID had something to do with that, to tell you the truth. The pandemic hit, maybe young people who grew up here left to a bigger city, maybe never thought of coming back, but were forced to.
Right.
And have seen some of the changes that have occurred in Norfolk and say, okay, I can see myself living here now. I think that's a sizable portion of this too. So
yeah, well, and again, hats off to you. You guys have been able to create an environment that people are really excited about. And yeah, it's like you had all the tools there. It's kind of like when you have all the tools to make something work financially or whatever, and you're putting it off for some reason or the other. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe you don't want to pull the trigger, you don't want to change your life around this thing, but you have the tools at your disposal. And that's kind of, I feel like, how Norfolk was as a community. You know, we had big business, we had small business, we have a good population base. You obviously have a very active medical field because of where we're located. Mm-hmm. And some people weren't pulling the last few triggers to make it all happen.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes it's that collective investment in quality of life enhancement, right? I mean, you see models like, I lived in Lincoln at the time, early 2000s. I remember the city paid for an economic development analysis of the city of Lincoln, and it was some kind of national consultant came in and said, look, you guys are basically standing still. You've got all these building blocks, but you're not doing anything with them.
Right.
And it kind of shook up, I remember it shook up the business community in Lincoln, who kind of just assumed everything's okay, you know, kind of autopilot. But it opened people's eyes to seeing how important it is to make those collective investments. And things like in Lincoln, the Antelope Valley Restoration Project was put into motion. And the big one, the arena, building the arena, right? And if people remember the Haymarket before the arena, there wasn't much of one.
It stopped pretty short at Laszlo's. I mean, that was about it.
It wasn't a destination, whereas today it's a destination, right? And it's brought in a lot of dollars, a lot of money into Lincoln, a lot of new growth, a lot of new business activity. And it's made Lincoln a place where more and more young people want to stay.
Oh my gosh!
Instead of moving I love Kansas
Lincoln.
City or Denver or Minneapolis, right?
Yeah, so, no, Lincoln's a really fun town. For those of you who don't know me or my story, you know, I went to school 2008 to 2012. Just did the bachelor's program, Ag Econ, and then I spent 4 years very single, so I had to go back to Lincoln. From Wisner, and then I met my wife, and she was in dental school. So all in, pretty much spent a decent chunk of time from 2008 to 2020 in Lincoln, and it is Nebraska has some really great communities. Lincoln's one of them. Norfolk's one of them. Norfolk's, you know, obviously. What's our population now?
That's another. So technically, we went through this. As far as an exact count, because we went through a fairly large annexation process last year. And from 2000, what we found is from early 2020 to late 2021, we grew by about 1,850 people.
Okay.
And so that puts us just over 26,000 at this point. Then you throw in, you know, Woodland Park, which is close to Norfolk, obviously not part of Norfolk. You get close to that 30,000 mark. Yeah. With that. And so, it's not a coincidence. I mean, I talked about those 1,500 new housing units. It makes sense that correlation, you know, population growth would correlate with that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So. Well, it's just exciting to see where things are going. I think that your leadership's been good, and I think that we're going to have to make Myolean Piedmontese a really big beef brand here. And
I think that sounds good.
Yeah, and, I think that you can take on certified That should be easy.
Yeah, right.
I joke.
Just a little drop in the bucket.
I
right?
don't know them very well,
Yeah.
but I've my wife drove past the Certified Piedmontese, their facility in Lincoln, and I said, "Oh, they're kind of starting where I want to end."
Mm-hmm.
That's an incredible campus.
They've created a model there too, and it's been good. I mean, obviously we're nowhere large enough to be a competitor, but what it has done is build
for you.
awareness of the breed, and that's been very positive. So,
do you know them personally?
I just barely through my previous life as a political aide, but I do know the story. The Sand Hills Publishing is kind of the base company, and then there was acquisition of MBA Poultry, and that was very successful for them, and then I think kind of led into what they're doing now with Certified Piedmontese beef.
Yeah, well, for anybody that's going through Lincoln, if you're on 84th, right? It's out on 84th.
Yep.
Drive past. It's really cool, and they've got a nice butcher shop, and I think they've got a restaurant as well.
Yeah, they do.
But it's a absolute, kind of mecca, if you will, of what you would do if you were just ready to take on the direct-to-consumer thing.
Right.
They've done a really, really nice job. In Sand Hills Publishing, for those of you who don't know, that's like Tractor House, Truck Paper, Controller.com, a lot of those kind of listings. But
it's good for Nebraska beef brand, right? Going back to all different types, varieties. But I think what makes the difference and makes people on the coast pay attention is the word Nebraska, right? Because that's what we are known for, and that's the type of branding we need to continue to capitalize on.
Yeah, by the way, Albert's Beef, the Taste of Nebraska tradition, is trademarked. So you can't have it.
The Taste of Nebraska tradition. I like it. Yeah,
it's trademarked.
Yeah.
That's the only time. I early on, I spent a lot more on legal fees than I was working on some export deals, so I was a little more excited about the lawyers.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But I mean, not to dive too far into that world, but that's another opportunity potentially. There's just like there's a recognition domestically of Nebraska beef. It exists worldwide.
Absolutely, and there's and certainly that is just in a facility like this, that's just more paperwork. But it is an accessible market. You have to have the right size, and that's been the battle, and the reason we want to build this the entire time is you got to be the right size. You don't have to be massive, but you got to have good throughput. You got to have good, consistent throughput. Otherwise, some of these opportunities aren't going to present them to yourself. They're not going to present themselves. You're not going to be able to go trade a truckload of 50s if you're harvesting 3 or 4 head. You're not going to be able to go export some cut combos. You're not going to be able to do those things, and I think that a lot of guys get caught up in where they are at today. I want to make $300-400 on this animal, or $1,000, whatever. Name your price. Maybe you make an extra $50 a head, or spend $50 a head, and get that volume up, and start finding ways to value up that animal.
It's an incremental process.
You're right. Yeah. And that's like I was telling you. I think what we will start with is being really upfront with guys. Like, okay, Josh, how many pounds of burger do you really think you'll move? How many of those chuck roasts do you really think you'll move? And because you're going to sell your ribeyes, your strips, your sirloins, your tenderloins. You're going to sell that stuff. You can about sell those to your friends and family. What happens with the rest of that animal, and I think we're just going to really try and key in on that and say, okay, I'm going to have an upfront conversation. This is how I'm treating my brand. I'm only keeping 50 pounds for retail hamburger. The rest is wholesale. And I've got all my middles, and we've started working on, so like thin meats, like, you know, we're going to trade a really expensive skirt steak, you know, and just be incremental about it, be methodical about it. And even though I've had this thought process for a long time, I haven't been able to do it because there wasn't a facility that really allowed for it.
Right.
But so that's where we're at, and I hope we provide a good another 20, maybe more jobs in Norfolk. We've got the room for a lot more.
You do, yeah. I was impressed on the tour that we took before this with how much room you do have to grow here, and you've got a great foundation. And again, the benefit that you're providing to local producers who are smaller to mid-size, to have another outlet and to, I don't want to say experiment because it's, to make it work, it's much more than experimentation, right? But to venture out a little bit on doing these things that help the producer capture more of that dollar. It's very hard to do it if you're just trying to do it on your own. But if you've got an outlet like yours, where there's a distribution point and the logistics are more or less available to you to work out in conjunction with what you're already doing, then that's a big deal.
Yeah. So what I think that we're going to really hone in on, you know, is making sure that, I kind of lost my train of thought here. So I'm going to pivot quick. TVG Capital owns the old American beef plant down the road. Mm-hmm. Now, is that the rumor is that's getting turned into cold storage? Is that in process? Is that going on?
That is also what I've heard. Yeah.
Okay, so we had no more information than that.
Not really. No, not a lot more concrete information than that. But I think that is the intent. So that was another reason we're really excited about this location is building cold storage is expensive. Yes.
And you know, it's a necessity though. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not quite like a packaging machine or a grinding machine where it's measurable. Certainly is measurable if you're a cold storage facility, but for somebody like us, that's going to be, that investment is going to be less measurable than pounds through a grinder or pounds into a roll stock machine. Yep. But at any rate, this has been really, really fun. Yeah. And I think we'll definitely do it again when I've got more time. I've got to go make a video on how to make crab legs. Okay. So. Hey, it never stops, right? Yeah. The day before Thanksgiving is grind it out. Yeah, this, you know, I may have my brother over, so I have an excuse to drink. There you go. You know, so it's not all. It's all encompassing. Yeah. Well, cheers. Good. Hey, thank you for the invitation. Enjoyed it. Absolutely. Thanks, God, I kind of lost my train of thought there, but that was fun. That was good. Yeah. I wish we could go to the bar. I would much rather do that. Yeah. Well, and you made some nice changes with Bar A. Getting Matthew was a big deal. He's a good guy, good bartender. I had too much stuff to do with, down here to do that right. Mm-hmm. The only regret I have